Just like a mosaic is made up of individual pieces that create a beautiful mosaic, your business is a tapestry of interconnected parts. On the Mosaic Life, we'll explore those parts of a business from marketing to finance to mindset and innovation. I'm your host, Laura Wagenknecht, and together we'll discover how to arrange those pieces to create a thriving and fulfilling business. Welcome, and thank you for tuning into the show. To reach me, contact Laura at mosaicbusinessconsulting.com. And I got to tell you, I have been waiting for this interview for I don't know how long. It is so exciting to have her on board. So today, my guest is none other than Dr. Amy Climer, and she teaches teams and organizations how to increase their creativity so they can maximize innovation. She works with forward-thinking organizations such as the Mayo Clinic, Stanford University, and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Yeah, very small, low ball hitters I can see. Yeah. Amy is now the author of a new book, Deliberate Creative Teams, How to Lead for Innovative Results. I love it. Put it back up there. She is also the host of the Deliberate Creative podcast. It's a tongue twister, where she shares practical advice and strategies for leaders to build innovative teams. Amy has a PhD in leadership and change and is a certified speaking professional, not an easy feat. And then today she is going to share her research on creative teams. So welcome to the show, Amy. It is so great to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much, Laura. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm just thrilled. And, I got to start with the biggest question because everybody, creativity. What is creativity and why is it people like me think we have none? And why is it that people like you think we have some? So,
okay, let's start with what it is with the definition.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of confusion and a lot of myths around creativity.
Yeah.
So the definition, and I did not make this up, this comes from the research literature, is creativity is novelty that is valuable.
Oh.
So what that means is, novelty meaning new, original, unique, different. And then valuable, it could be something financially valuable. That's usually where we go first. But it also could be emotionally valuable, intellectually valuable. It could just be fun. So creativity is essentially doing something new that adds value in some way. You're basically solving problems.
So you're also saying when we play and we're having fun, in a way we haven't had fun before, that is creative.
Sure, absolutely. That could be. In fact, that's where as kids we learn to be creative is through play. It's actually a really important part of our development. But even as adults, we still need it some.
Yeah. Like those board games or Jeopardy or whatever it is, right? On TV. So what do you tell somebody like me who thinks, oh, I'm not creative at all? I simply copy everybody else. What do you tell me?
Well, I think some of it is just understanding what creativity is, like we just talked about, that, if you're copying somebody else, you're taking what they did and hopefully you're doing it in a slightly different way. So we're not talking about plagiarism per se, I'm assuming. We're talking about taking some inspiration from another business coach or another company and saying, oh, I like what they did. I'm going to do something similar, but I'm going to add my own twist. I'm going to add my own perspective. And this happens all the time in the world. This is how, like anything that you can think of has probably been iterated by different people, right? Even the fact that we're using Zoom to make this recording.
Yeah.
Zoom didn't invent this concept, right? There was Skype before that and all these other companies that created this like video thing, and it's just been iterated and improved. And so there's a certain aspect of that copying that is a normal part of us as humans. I think people get confused about creativity because they think, and we were talking about this before we started the recording, is creativity has to do with our ability to draw. And it doesn't. It has nothing to do with that. And I don't know quite the source of that. I know most of us have had experiences as kids where we had bad experiences, told we weren't creative because we couldn't draw. So maybe it gets all confused in our head. But as adults, I mean, unless you are a professional artist, your ability to draw is actually not that important, nor is it
Right.
directly connected to your ability to be creative.
Right. And so when you're thinking about it in terms of teams, which I
Mm.
think you're talking about it, I'm wondering like the various aspects of creativity within a team or even as the whole company. Because when you're talking about a Mayo Clinic, I mean, it's huge, right? And you have departments that might be teams. So, what are some of the things we want to think about when you're talking about incorporating that creativity into a team that's a larger, maybe a larger company? And then we can shrink it if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I think that there's sort of maybe just a little bit of lingo. Um, when I think of a team, I am thinking of a small group of people. So
I see.
generally, 3 to 15 is a good size. Sometimes maybe it's up to 20. If it's more than that, then I would consider that an organization or like multiple teams that are together. Let's say you have 50 people in the room and they're being referred to as a team. The reality is they're probably sub teams.
Right,
You
exactly.
know,
Little siloed teams. Yeah.
exactly. And they might do a really great job of communicating and collaborating with each other, but um, yeah, so I think there's like that organizational level, which is important, but then there's also that team level. A lot of my work happens at that team level. And I get really jazzed about that because, I mean, an organization is made up of a bunch of individual teams, right? And
Yeah.
there's a lot of power in the teams. And basically, teams are the number one source of innovation in organizations, hands down. And so I think there's a lot of that's really important. The teams are super important.
Yeah. And you talk about innovation again, and you also talk about the team size, which I think is fascinating. And so when we think about, let's break that down to give people context. If we're thinking about, let's say, a marketing team, you might have somebody for graphics, another team that's working on the website, another team that's working on social media or content development or something like that. But they're sub teams of that 50 plus people that you were talking about. And then secondly, I'm thinking about that innovation. I liked how you mentioned that here we are on a Zoom call that is allowing us to see each other live video streamed, but video didn't come around. It had iterations to get to that point. And so we're talking about a camera that switched to something else that switched, right? And
Mhm.
so when we think of innovation, why is it that so many of us get stuck in that if it's not new enough or big enough, then it's not innovative?
Hmm.
What can we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just, again, like a lot of myths and misunderstanding about what innovation is and what we call innovative. And but I think most of us, if we will also say most of us probably don't think about innovation that much. I think about it sort of a ridiculous amount. Um, but when we really think about it, it makes sense that things are more iterative.
Mm,
There's sort of these phrases. We sometimes use the phrase in the creativity research of evolutionary innovation or evolutionary creativity, and then revolutionary creativity. But the reality is, even if you're looking at something revolutionary, if you pull back the curtain and break it down, it's just all these little steps. I mean,
mm,
even something like the iPhone, which we really put up on a pedestal. They didn't invent smartphones. They didn't invent cell phones. They just did it. They iterated and did it a little better and a
yeah.
little better. And they had some standards they were meeting. And so I think a lot of it is that unless you're really digging into the creativity and the innovation, it can just look like a black box and we don't see it. It's very
Yeah.
much, and I'm sure you see this in your work, is, the businesses that just like exploded overnight, like this overnight success.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're not an
No.
overnight success. They've been working their butts off for 10 years, right? Or 15
Exactly.
years. And all of a
Exactly.
sudden, yeah. So I think it's
Yeah.
more of almost like a marketing or a PR thing, a problem than it is That's just perpetuating that misunderstanding. And
Yeah.
it's flashy, it's cool to think like, oh, we did this like revolutionary thing, but it's maybe not. And so that's something I would just encourage listeners, don't get caught up in that hype. That
Mm.
creativity is really, at the end of the day, it is about sitting down and it's doing the hard work. And maybe
Well,
that's
go ahead. I
uh,
apologize.
well, and I was going to say maybe that's the challenge with it is that it does require hard work, which, well, that's hard at times.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think you're talking about a process that we all need to go through, but it also seems to me that there there has to be not just the myth barriers that we have to creativity, but what are those barriers to creativity? What's blocking us from our ability to think we're creative or to be creative?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think part of it is that creativity is a skill. And so it's just like, if you want to be a better leader, then you would study leadership. You might read some books or go to some trainings, get some feedback, and you'd practice these skills. And creativity is the same way. But the problem is we're not teaching that very often. Um,
Hmm.
so what would be ideal, this doesn't happen, is if we were to teach creativity in school, like in middle school, high school, if we start teaching students how to be more creative, helping them understand there's a process that you follow. The process that I teach is called creative problem solving. There's 4 stages to it. And if we understood that, we'd actually be able to produce more creative, innovative results. But instead, what happens is we go to school, K-12 education, and we are taught information where we take multiple choice test questions, and then we become an adult. And I can't think of a single time in my entire life where a boss came to me and said, "Hey, could you please solve this problem and please select choice A, B, or C?" Right? Like it never happens.
Yeah.
Instead, we are asked to do something. There's usually many right ways or many good ways. And so it's this disconnect between the way we were taught growing up and then now as an adult, what we're expected. And I think it creates a lot of confusion. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. And it explains some of that idea that you talked about a four-step process. What is that four-step process you talked about to becoming creative or
Yeah.
to, you know, what is it for us to tap into our creativity, if you will?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's called the creative problem solving process. And there's a bunch of processes out there, at least, half a dozen or a dozen of them. They're all very, very similar. This is the one that I teach my clients. There's 4 stages. The first stage is clarify, where we've got a problem and we're trying to clarify what's the situation, what are we trying to do, what do we need to change. It's a time where you're generally asking a lot of questions, doing some research, kind of figuring it out. So there's a clarify stage. The next stage is ideate, where you're generating lots of ideas to solve that particular problem you just figured out. So clarify, ideate. Now, in that ideate stage, hopefully you generate lots of ideas. I'm not talking like 2, 3, 4 ideas, but dozens, maybe hundreds, depending on the scale of the problem. And some of those, I would say many of those ideas will not be worthwhile, but maybe 10% of them. And so let's say you have you can generate 100 ideas, which doesn't take as long as you would think. You now have 10 ideas that are really good or really potentially viable. We don't know if they're good yet, but they're like, okay, these have some potential.
Mm-hmm.
You take those 10 ideas into the next stage, which is develop, where you develop those ideas a bit further, see, okay, do we think this will work? If so, what might it look like? And then finally, you're implementing. And that implementation might be you're prototyping, you're testing, you're piloting something out. Like, I always encourage my clients, like, what's the smallest scale you can start with?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of building out this huge thing, what can you do in a very short time to just see if this might work?
Mm-hmm.
So clarify, ideate, develop, implement.
Yeah.
And the challenge with this is, well, first let me back up and say, this is based on how we as humans naturally solve problems. So this sort of came about in the 1940s, and the researchers who were looking at, they didn't like invent it, they didn't make it up, but they just observed people and realized, oh, this is what we naturally do. So
Right.
it's innate in us to do this. But there's a big problem, and that is because each of us has a preference for one or more of those four areas.
Right.
And
Right.
we want to stay in that space as long as we can because it feels really good. And then we don't want to move to the next stage, or we want to hurry up and get to that last stage if we love implementing. And there's a measurement that you can measure, you test yourself. It's called foresight. I'm trained in this and I use it with my clients. And as an example, I love ideating and I love implementing. I'm not the best at clarifying and developing. And so in my business, I'll get an idea of something I want to do. And I'm like, all right, cool, let's go, let's get started. And it's fun, it's energizing for me. But then when I go to get started, I'm like, um, wait a minute,
Yeah.
why, like, why am I doing this?
And it's so funny you say that because I'm similar in that regard, like this idea, oh, now I've got to develop a process. You mean I have to develop a system? Ugh. I have to develop like rules and guidelines. Oh,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
but if you don't have that, then you end up duplicating your efforts over and over, right? And but I thought something that you said was really interesting, and it was about during this process, not only do we stop things, but we have the doers, we have the thinkers, we have the strategizers. You want all of them, but there's another block that I think you're not talking through, and I sense that that might be part of this is communication and how we don't necessarily talk on the same level, right? We're talking around each other, over each other, under each other, unintentionally,
Right.
just having conversation, and we're thinking, well, of course they think that because that's what I'm thinking, right?
Right. I know we often think that everyone else thinks the way we do, but life
Oh,
teaches us that's not
yeah,
the thing. That's not the case.
exactly. And I'm thinking about the brainstorming, right? So we're all throwing out and spitballing ideas and stuff like that. And somebody's idea over here might connect really well with somebody's idea over here. And the two of them together could be that perfect solution. But how do you get people past their egos,
Mm,
past their challenges to communicate and articulate what they're trying to do?
yeah. Well, first I'll say you've nailed it. Like this is exactly the challenge with teams, right?
Right.
And you've also not only said the challenge, it's the strength, right? That, yeah, I love when I get to work with clarifiers and developers because together we're going to be rock stars, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So the way I work with clients around this issue is one of the first things is we do this foresight assessment so they can see where their preferences lie in that creative problem solving process. And then, I could put up a graph of the entire team or even the entire organization, depending how big we're going. And that's really cool to see that sometimes you'll have organizations, like I just worked with the manufacturing company. They have a lot of clarifiers and implementers.
Oh,
And so they had people that were asking good questions and then they wanted to get started, but they had two ideators out of 55 people. And so they weren't
oh wow.
generating like a lot of new ideas. But
I
now that
see.
they know that, they can also recognize, okay, let's slow down. The implementers don't want to talk about it, they want to get started. Where the clarifiers want to talk about it a lot and don't before they get started. And so even if you just look at those two groups and they can understand each other's perspective, they can slow down a little bit and think, okay, let's start with clarifying. Let's give the clarifier, let's ask some questions, because even implementers need to clarify.
Yes. Yeah.
And then let's tap into the ideators and see if they can help generate some more ideas. And then you go to develop and implement and so forth. And so if you can slow that down and you recognize where you are in the process, if I'm a strong implementer, I know, okay, we're clarifying right now. My time will come. I can be patient, I can participate, I can engage in this, and I'll know that once we get to my stage, I'll get to like hit the ground running, right? Versus
Yeah.
before you go through understanding foresight, you're just butting heads because you don't get the whole process.
Well, not only is that true, and that I think is also part of the challenge for larger organizations where the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. But additionally, I'm thinking about this idea that there's a thought that clarifiers are the naysayers, if you will. They're the people who are picking things apart and saying, well, can we do this? If this, then that kind of an
Right.
approach. And they're saying, well, we don't have a mechanism in place, or if we have a mechanism in place, it's not very effective, or it won't help, and
Yep.
so I think that there's also that, like, you have the go, 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 go people, and you have the, well, wait a minute. Hello, what if? So how do you encourage both voices to be heard
Yeah.
and recognized and appreciated and valued, but at the same time recognize that there's going to be frustration and potential conflict there?
Yeah, this is a great question. And this is one that most teams struggle with at some point, if not regularly.
Yeah.
And so the first thing I try to explain is this concept between divergent thinking and convergent thinking. And
Mm.
so divergent thinking is what, we think of the classic brainstorming where we're generating ideas, we're thinking broad and bold, and might be a little bit all over the place. And then there's convergent thinking where you're evaluating the ideas. You can almost think of divergent as like throwing stuff in a bucket or funnel, and then converging is pushing it through that funnel to what's the best idea for this context.
Yeah.
Now, what happens in our brains is that we physically can't do both those at the same time. So
Bummer.
I know, right? A huge bummer. Multitasking doesn't actually work, right? We all know that by now.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to generate ideas, you're trying to be creative, you want to let the team know, like, okay, we're going to be in some divergent thinking mode for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever it is. And then we're going to move into convergent thinking and we're going to select the best ideas. And if teams understand that and they know, well, I'm not so sure about that idea, but let me just hang on because I know I'll have that opportunity. So that is super helpful.
Yeah.
There's actually these rules that we use for divergent thinking to help us understand, like, hey, we're just going to hang out in this like space. It's a little weird, but it's okay. And those rules are suspend judgment. You get to judge the ideas, just not yet. Because judging ideas is very important because, well, there are bad ideas in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
suspend judgment, combine and build on ideas. So, Laura, you share an idea, I share an idea. A third team member might like say, oh, yes, let's take both those and do this. That's awesome. Go a little wacky and wild, go for wild ideas. And then the fourth one is go for quantity. So
Oh, wow.
quantity leads to quality. That's the concept, that
I see.
you're not going for the first or second idea necessarily. Let's just make a list, pull out the flip chart, pull out the post-it notes, whatever you need, and like get as many ideas down as you can. And you can set a timer, and literally in 5 minutes, you can get quite a few ideas.
Yeah, yeah.
And then from there, I'm like, okay, we got all these ideas up. Let's now start evaluating and judging them.
Okay. And so people who are going to go through this process with you are going to gain this whole trajectory. And what have you seen with the businesses that you've worked with as far as their return on investment, or as far as their growth as an organization, or their expansion of creativity and innovation?
Yeah. I will say one of the challenges I have is that I'm often with businesses kind of on that front end, and then they go off and implement whatever we've come up with. And I haven't done a ton of research,
yeah.
but I can still share with you a little bit. some examples of things I've worked with. Just recently, I worked with a manufacturing company, and we had about 55 people in the room. We spent a day and a half together. They were in about 10 different teams, and each team was looking at a different problem within the organization. We had a total of 5 problems, so 2 teams per problem. And they walked away with some excellent ideas. And these
Wow.
were things like one of the problems was a 24-hour manufacturing facility. And one of the issues they had is that when a new shift would start, there was about a half hour or so of just dead time, like nothing was happening in the plant. And they were trying to figure out, how do we make this a little smoother, a little quicker? I mean, obviously there's going to be some downtime, but does it need to really be 30 minutes? Can we make this 10 minutes, 15? And it was just, yeah, so they came up with some new ideas to address that problem. And if you multiply the numbers of, let's say they got 15 minutes more of productivity out of 3 different shifts, so 45 minutes a day, multiplied by 365, it was a 24/7 plant.
Yeah.
I don't know what that number is, but it's in the millions.
Yeah, it's
It-
insane. That's
it-
fantastic.
yeah,
And
it's
so
amazing.
you not only improve productivity and efficiency, you've also then saved the company so much more because they're producing and not sitting around. Yeah.
Yeah,
So they're not
exactly.
spending money, they're producing. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're not
Wow.
just saving, they're making money.
Yeah, that's a great combo. That's fantastic. Well, so if people want to get in touch with you, how can they contact you? I know we could keep going, but there is a limit,
There is
unfortunately.
a limit.
So if people want to reach out to you, how can they contact you?
You can certainly find me on LinkedIn at Amy Climer, Dr. Amy Climer. My website is climerconsulting.com, which is Climer consulting. You can also check out my brand new book. It just came out
I
this
love
month,
it.
February 2025. It's called Deliberate Creative Teams, How to Lead for Innovative Results. I'm really excited. I share the process that we just talked about, as well as this model I created on the 3 elements teams need if they want to be creative together. And there's some good stories in there as well. So yeah, check it out. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, and I know we didn't get to that, and I would love to keep talking because there were those 3 steps are really fantastic. And yeah, so well, I'll just have you back.
There
That's
you
all it is
go.
to it. Yeah. So maybe we can do that another time. But I really appreciate so much all of your time and all of your brilliance and information. I mean, it's just so necessary, especially in this time when we think about AI and we think about how amazing the human brain is and how amazing and innovative we are that AI cannot be.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that creativity and innovation, this is what sets us apart as humans. And as
Yeah.
we have incredible capacity as humans, I really believe we can pretty much solve all the problems on the planet, which, most of them we created in the first place. But I think we have that capacity if we're able to tap into our collaborative creativity.
Yeah. So great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Amy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura.
And thank you, the audience, for listening to The Mosaic Life. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day.